to start the recording and then we can get started. We'll cut this stuff out later.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what week are we on?
This is episode, hold on. Oh, so in our Google Doc, I made another tab with the schedule. So
amazing. So we can just fill it in there.
3, 4, 5, 6. This is episode 7,
okay,
which will release on August 31st. So I just did like when did we record it? When are we releasing it? And then like, just because I put your vacation in just so that we have that schedule going and we can kind of get an idea of our release schedule. And we can start to fill out like, because I was just doing it on my calendar, like, because I knew I said like, there's an artist who has a show coming out in November, so I pushed her to October, but like, I want to like, or September, we're going to record it because it'll be before the show. And I'm like, let me get this into a spreadsheet just so that we can eye it up and say, oh, we got gaps to fill or we got places to go. So
yeah. Okay, cool.
I watched the one that you released today, by the way.
Oh, did you?
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Tell me that.
I know.
To be fair, you literally come home from work, had dinner, and then like got on with this.
And then
got on.
Turned into an audio technician.
Yeah. Okay, let's crack on. So welcome to episode 7 of The Art is Alchemy. My name's Steph. I am a fantasy photographer from Lincoln in the UK.
And I'm John Cruz. I'm a portrait photographer in Philadelphia in the United States.
And our guest today, if you want to introduce yourself.
And I'm Brad. I'm a motorsport photographer from Lincoln in the UK.
Okay. Thanks for coming in today, Brad. So let's dig in. So tell us about how long have you been doing photography and kind of how did you kind of get into motorsport? You don't hear a lot about motorsport photographers.
Well, it's a really good question because I feel like every photographer has it's a funny story because everyone starts in a weird way. So I've been probably shooting for 2 years, I think, about now. And I get started by a bet or a challenge, if you like, by a friend who is a photographer, a good friend of mine. And he basically says that he's going to go do some motorsport stuff. And I said to him, I like watching motorsport, but not photography, though, because photography is really boring. And then basically he turns around and says, all right, then you're on, get your hands on a camera and I'll take you. So the rest is history, really. I grab a camera, I go, I love it. I think it's going to be, how hard can it be? Point and click, right? Yeah. Well, as it turns out, it's not like that. It's a lot harder than that.
Did you get your ass handed to you a little bit?
I got my ass. Well, it's quite. The best image from that very first outing, I still have. It's actually at the very bottom of my Instagram page. So the first image that I ever post is the best image from there, and it's terrible. It's terrible.
I was gonna say, like, I thought you were gonna go take that in another way. Like, do either of you play golf?
No.
Like, there's an old joke about like, once you like you go out and you hack away for 18 holes, you hit that one good shot and it makes you come back the next time. Like it's like you hit that one shot, you're like, oh, I think I can do this, and then you just start going, and it's always that one shot that brings you back. So I thought you were gonna say, oh, I got lucky. I shot 1,000 things. I got this one that was like perfect. I'm like, oh, I can do this if I work at it. But
well, at the time, I thought it was a great shot, but I put it up on my Instagram for exactly that purpose.
Yeah.
Because I needed a yardstick, and I've left it there. Lots of people would have pulled it down off their Instagram or whatever you, but I've left it there because I want it as a reminder that's where you started, and that was what good looked like then.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, good is not something you would put alongside that image, but to me at the time, it was the best image that I'd taken.
But I think that's like, Steph and I have talked about this before. I think that like that's a barrier to entry for any artist. It's like no one's good at it when you start. It's until you work at the craft, and if you're enjoying the process, put it out there, because the notion that like someone walks into an artistic endeavor and it's like, oh, we got this solved. I mean, like, we're doing a podcast with like, audio issues and things like that. Like, we're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
there yet. Like, we're not in studios. We don't have like sound mixing boards and all that stuff. Like, but we're putting it out there because like we'll get better, but like it's okay. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome that
yeah.
I think it's awesome you put it up there to like as a marker.
Yeah, well, if it's a journey for everyone, right? So from day one to wherever they are now and wherever they're going in the future, it's a constant journey. So if you're going to put yourself out there, I think it's important to show that to everyone and show that not everything is perfect all the time, because Instagram's like that, isn't it? And when people put work out there, it's always perfect and polished and whatever but that's not the reality. The reality is nothing like that, and we're all always learning all the time. So it shouldn't be a barrier to entry, really.
What was it? I'm interested. That took you from, oh, this is going to be really boring, to I love it. I'm going to take it up as a hobby job. What was that thing?
That it was hard.
Okay.
If it was easy, I'd have put it down immediately.
Yeah.
Because I like things to be a challenge, and it's still a challenge. Every day it's a challenge, because you're always learning and trying to do things differently to everyone else. There's lots of photographers out there, right? But it's quite a challenge to stay on top of that and try and be different and push that boundary constantly, to do something different to everyone else. So yeah, the fact that it was hard actually made me want to figure it out, because I don't like being beaten.
So,
and you like being intellectually challenged?
Yeah.
So walk me through, because motorsports is like that's a big, like that's a large, like there's a bunch of different motorsports going on. So like, do you focus on specific types of races, like specific types of vehicles, like, or is it like, do you run the gamut? And if you do run the gamut, like what's different between this one or that one that you have to like adjust for? Because I'm assuming the speeds of these vehicles make it a challenge to say, okay, I have to do this for this race.
Yeah. Weirdly, when you swap from one to another, you have to mentally shift as well. So the majority of the time, I'm following around the British touring cars and the British GT. So car-wise, that ranges from sort of normal saloon cars that you'd expect to see, Ford Focuses, that sort of stuff. They're cars that are doing what, 130, 140, 150 mile an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But then the British GT is Ferraris, McLarens, so they're doing a bit more than that. But then it's not to say that I wouldn't shoot anything else, because it's such a niche thing. It's not like family photography, right? Where you can go out and just everyone, there's a bunch of families everywhere and you can go do it. You've got to go to a track and it's got to be, the racing's got to be on and all that sort of thing. But I would still go to as many things as I could go to, regardless of what's going on, because it's like anything. If you don't do it often, you get rusty and stop doing it, or can't do it when you need to. And motorsport photography, it's not like you can pose people up and let's take that shot again. There's no second take. Right. It does 150 mile an hour right to left, and if you miss it, it's gone. It'll come around again, but there's no guarantee that moment's going to happen again. So it's different in that sense.
And do you have any kind of, you mentioned, you would shoot other things. Do you have any ambition to shoot, like, I don't know, landscape or families or portraits, anything like that?
Portraiture. I've done some model photography and some like city photography, but really when I was doing that was downtime. So that's trying something different, doing something entirely different, in a different setting. A change is as good as a break sometimes. So and it also, there's different aspects of photography. It doesn't always have to be the same subject matter, right? You can You can try different things and do different things.
I do that occasionally, like I will go as far as to like take an old film camera and just do street scenes, because when I'm doing portraits, I'm trying to tell a story. Like there's an orchestration to that. When you're doing street scenes, you're just waiting for something to happen, and it's just like, okay, let me see what, and it feels very meditative. So it's like a way to like kind of break your creative brain and like put it back together,
like a reset switch almost.
Yeah, but I wanted to get back.
Doing.
I wanted to get back to like when you were talking about the 150 miles an hour, and they'll come back around, but it may not be that moment again. When you're looking at the track and you're like, photography is storytelling, and you're going to tell a story. Like, what are you looking at? And I don't know what the distance is that you're eyeing it up, and you're like, okay, I'm going to have a moment here. Like, what's something where you go, I think I have a story to tell, and I got to hit this shot.
I don't know whether anyone's a motorsport fan, but you can see it coming, basically. So there's I don't know, maybe someone's gaining on someone else. You can see there's an overtake coming. You can see that they want to get past, but there's no room, or there's barely any room, or it's going to be tight, or someone's pushing it, or it's just started to rain and they've got the wrong tires on, or you can see something's about to happen. But the steep learning curve for me was making sure your lens is always pointing in the right direction. The amount of times I would be like this and something would happen here, and yeah, it's that it took me a long time to know where I should be and what I should be pointing at what moment, because I'd get easily distracted by other things. But yeah, you can sort of see it coming and be facing in the right moment or the right place at the right time.
How do you like stop all the photos looking the same? Like, essentially, because you mentioned about, with model photography, it's different faces, or it might be, if it's city, might be different scenery. But how do you stop of like cars looking all the same? Like, do you try and get action shots? Like, how does it work?
Well, there's a variety of different things that you can shoot at motorsport, and I think one of the mistakes people make is only do one thing. So only do track shots or stand on one corner permanently. There's a whole racetrack there. Go walk around it. There are different angles, different shots. The only thing I think about, everyone's seen football, right? So everyone's seen the photographers at the side of the pitch, and they know where the angle is, and they all bunch together and they all stand in that one spot. Motorsport's similar in the sense that all the photographers bunch together, but that's boring because you have thousands of images at the exact same angle, at the exact same point, at the exact same moment. So something that I concentrate on when I'm wandering around, and I'll actually walk around a circuit before I start, and it's looking for angles, looking for weird and wonderful different angles that you can get a shot, or even you think you can get a shot, just because then your image is entirely different to everyone else's. And also, I'm looking for holes in fences and shots through trees and high curbs, so the car's going to bounce and be on two wheels and that sort of thing.
It sounds like it sounds like it's like the Lionel Messi method of photography, like his whole thing where he wanders the pitch, like just walks for like the first 2 to 3. I don't think he's ever scored a goal in the first 3 minutes of any game, because he's walking and he's just figuring out how everything's playing out, and then he engages. So it's like you're wandering around, you're like, okay, now I know how this is going to play. And then
I suppose in a way, I wouldn't liken myself to Messi, like.
Take it.
I mean, we'll just put it out there. It's fun,
And when it comes to, obviously, car racing, there tends to be a fair few like crashes and stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you capture the crashes, or is that disrespectful, or how do you?
Well,
show
if they
those?
happen right in front of you. They happen right in front of you, yeah. There are times where you wouldn't take a photo, but that obviously depends on the outcome.
Yeah.
And what you do with that image depends on the outcome. So, but yeah, that's part of the excitement of it, right? So people with their elbows out, trying to fight the way around a track is part of the excitement of it. So that's the things that people want to see. The challenge is when something happens, things are changing direction and changing speed very quickly. So whilst, you know, we talked about panning and 150 mile an hour, well, in a crash, all of a sudden everything's changed direction. It's all at a different speed. It's all going random, different directions. So the challenge at that point is to actually think about what settings you had in the camera and how to adjust those rapidly so that you can continue shooting that shot.
I think that's a skill in itself. When I have to change mine, I'm literally like, hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, we can go again now. And I guess you don't really have that. You aren't really afforded that time in such a short bit when it's happening.
And
Yeah,
do you have
yeah.
to- I was gonna say, do you also have to like shift your brain? Because like there's two parts that are going on, or at least it feels like to me. There's the art part, like there's a panning shot, it's a beautiful shot, that's a piece of art. But then when like a crash happens or there's something, like then it shifts to journalism. There's a story that's going to have to be told. It's not like a piece of art, but somebody may need this to tell the story. And like to me, there are two very different approaches to any type of photography. It's like one, I'm going for a piece of art, and one I'm trying to convey what is happening.
Yeah. I think you're right, because if there's an event that happens during a race or a big crash or whatever, that's the talking point, right? So, you know, you don't go across a race and go, oh, do you remember when someone drove around that bend perfectly? That's not what you talk about. You talk about, you know, who won and what happened during the race, and did you see so and so spin? Did you see that crash? And they're the talking points. So not to monetize everything, but they're the money shots. They're the ones that everyone wants, as well as, you know, paddock stuff. But we can talk about that because it's not all about the track. But yeah, that's the stuff that everyone wants, and it's also the stuff that everyone misses, even the photographers there, because it happens so rapidly. You've got to be on it to get them, and if you're not and you miss it, then, you know, you could have 10 photographers and only one of them might get it. Maybe none of them get it.
Yeah. Especially if they're all bunched at the other end of the track. Like,
right.
you know,
Or all stood taking the same shot. Yeah.
So do you ever take any, I think I've seen some on Instagram actually, are in like the paddock areas, and how do you kind of get round to doing that? Because it feels like it's where photographers aren't allowed.
Yeah. So something I actually quite enjoy is I don't really take any images from anywhere that people can't go. So just in general, so a general run-of-the-mill spectator can stand everywhere that I'm standing. So the good thing about that is because there are photographers that have, you know, the special passes and whatever and they can get everywhere. But to me, it's quite fun to get a better shot than them, and I'm stood in the crowd, or find that better angle than them, and they're supposed to have the advantage. But yeah, you can go everywhere into the paddock. Depends on the race series. So in touring cars, you can go into the paddock and you can go get pretty close to the drivers and the teams and whatever you. The British GT is a bit different. So you can get into the paddock, but you need a paddock pass to get close to any of the drivers. So
just for my edification, I don't know that word. I don't know if it's a British thing or if it's because I'm not in the motorsports. Like, what is that as far as in the track?
So the paddock is where all the teams congregate and work on the cars, essentially.
Okay.
So it's like in the touring cars, for example, you have the main touring car drivers, which would be those teams would be in the garages down the pit lane, you know, the thing that you imagine would be. But then there's a support series behind racing. So for so and they're just, you know, around the paddock, which is a big tarmac area. They're all in big sort of tents, working on the cars. The same thing happens with F1, for example. The only thing you see on F1 on the TV is the garages all the time, but there are support series to F1 that never end up on the TV because it's all about the main event. But there's Porsche series and whatever that follow around F1, and they're all in the paddock as well. So the paddock is where you would go
to refuel and retire and all that malarkey.
Yeah, and to work on the car and whatever you in between races and make any tweaks. So there's quite a lot of stuff that goes on in there that people ignore, because like you said, John, there's a story, right? And most of that story isn't on the track. Most of it is behind the scenes, the hours that they've worked on it, the fact that they're working late, early, between races. There's drivers talking to each other. There's things going on around the paddock which makes up the stuff on the track. So to ignore that entirely would to be missing half of the story or most of the story. So it's important that you get all of that. And sometimes it's quite difficult to make a decision of where you're going to be as well, because there might be a race going on, but it might be, I don't know, it might be the support race, or it might be the main event race, but it's the third one of the day and you've got plenty of photos from earlier on, but the support teams are still in the paddock. Maybe that's a great time to go in there because the sun's right, or there's not going to be as many people in there because they're all watching the main event going around. So it's nice and empty and you can get some candid shots without any interruption and people getting in the way. So it's a decision making.
Didn't you say as well that one of the drivers was like only 16 or 17, did you say?
Yeah.
Which is mad, because in the UK you can't learn to drive. You can't get your provisional license until you're 17.
He doesn't have a driver's license. No driver's license, but has a race license.
Which is insane to me.
Funnily enough, he's that driver is in a 911 Carrera GT4.
Nice. But you could literally follow him through his career and tell that story, right?
Well, that's at the touring cars. So of those series, so there's the main cars and then the support series. Of all of them put together, the Porsche is the most powerful cars there, and that's the car that the 16-year-old drives.
Who decides who, like, do the teams pay for the cars, or how does it work with that?
You need to ask a team rather than talk about how it works.
Well, I suppose you seem very knowledgeable.
They can get sponsored. They can buy their cars. Some people are just have loads of money and they want a toy, so they go out and buy a car and run a race team. But yeah, there are manufacturers sponsoring teams and all sorts of things.
So you go to these shows, you take photos, then what do you do with the photos? Like, do you send them to the team? Do they use them in promotions? Like, how?
Sometimes. I mean, I'm quite early in this photography journey, so I'd love to say, yeah, I'm hired from all the teams and whatever you, and I'm not hired by all the teams or whatever you. At the minute, yes, please, just thanks. But yes, I do send them to the drivers, speak to them about it. Shy guys getting out, right? If you go there and take a photo and just post online, no one's going to see them. Well, they will, but you might get a few Instagram followers, but that's great, but that's not the aim of the game. No one can, as much fun as it is, no one can continue doing it for free for a long period of time, unless it's just like a little hobby. If you really want to do something right, you've got to get yourself out there. And you've got to put yourself in front of people and have those conversations and have them one-on-one directly, rather than via someone else and hope they might see it. They don't make it a hope they might see it. Give it to them. Give it to them, put it in front of them, have that conversation. Don't be shy about it. The worst thing that can happen is to say, oh no, we're all good, thanks, but thanks for the images, or I really like them. Hell, they might go, no, we don't, but I know someone that does. Or you don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Everyone talks, right? So the drivers are perfectly nice, the teams are perfectly nice, and they'll talk to each other, and you just got to keep going, keep turning up, keep being a face in the paddock, and not be shy about it, and they'll notice you're there.
Be a cheeky bee, like I always say.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you seeing a rise in popularity, in attention, at least here in the US? Like, there was always NASCAR. NASCAR was big. There was the Indianapolis 500. That was the IndyCar races. That was the one race that people knew about. And I knew a couple people that were into F1, but not many. And then Netflix came out with that series, and now it seems like I still don't watch it, but like it seems like every third person I talk to is now like an F1 fan, like out of the woodwork in like the past year. Like, are you seeing a rise in attention for motorsports and specifically then drawn to your art because of it?
I'm gonna park F1 just for a minute, because I'm not really involved with F1. But secondly, that's a different story, I think. But the British GT series this year has possibly one of the best grids ever. Talking about teams, talking about drivers. Like there are drivers that have come off the international stage just to race in the British GT series. Like, why would you do that? Like, that's mad. From a career, if you're thinking about being a career person, like if you're an actor and you're an international movie star, why would you come to one country to do a little, niche film? Why would you do that? And quite simply, it's because the British GT series is it's had so much investment in it, and yeah, it's kind of the main event in the UK at the minute. Touring cars less so, but it is or has been the number one race series in the UK for quite a while. Everyone's going to argue with me with that, but because it's a matter of opinion, and everyone will say no, TCR's better or this is better. But it's the mainstay and has been the mainstay for quite a while. F1, on the other hand, why is everyone that you talk to talking about F1? The Americans have just bought F1, so it's American owned.
Well, it's and they made that Netflix special to create promotion, and then so people watched it, and then they started, oh, this is interesting, and then all of a sudden it became a thing. It's like it was wild in the past like year and a half that it just ever since that special came out, and they did, if you read the tea leaves, they made that documentary as a promotional vehicle.
Yeah, the Americans bought F1, put that on Netflix, and are moving lots of races to America.
Yeah.
For the muggles listening, Brad, what's the difference between F1 and GT? Because I don't know. I don't know.
Cars. The cars that
that's it.
In its essence, the cars that are going around the track, and probably the amount of money involved.
Okay.
There's a lot. There's a lot of money involved in F1. A lot. Ridiculous. Eye-watering.
Would you say? But are you insinuating that the F1 drivers would be more skilled drivers as well?
Well, that's the top tier of everything.
Right. Okay.
But it's also like they're the most skilled in that car. Like, it's a different because at least here, and I can only base upon like the things I know here. Like, there's a fundamental difference between an Indy car and a NASCAR, and some drivers have tried to cross over, and they're like, it's just not. It's not the same vehicle. Like, they're not. It's a totally different.
There are examples of that. Like, you ever heard of a guy called Valentino Rossi?
No, but I'm also not a racing guy, so I don't know.
So Valentino Rossi is pretty globally famous for superbikes, world superbikes, and he is now racing in the World GT, which is kind of like the bigger brother of the British GT, if you like. But he went from racing on a motorbike to obviously racing in a car, 2 wheels to 4 wheels. And he was number 1 in superbikes or world superbikes. And then he still kept his following, and there was his number 46 everywhere. But he didn't do so well. But his skill set was still there, but he was just in a different vehicle. So it was a challenge for him to I mean, I'm speaking like I know him. I don't know him, but you could see it was a challenge for him to change. And also Max Verstappen, which everyone knows Max Verstappen because F1, but he actually has his name on a GT car. He's not been in it yet, but he's forever talking about, but is it my last year in F1? Do I want to move on and do something else? Well, in the background, there is a Verstappen car sat there in the British GT, but he's never been a driver in it yet. But his name's on the paper. So
that's very cool. I'm not aware of him, but it's for those people who
we're talking about racing now instead.
I know. So you said at the start, you said about it, like you took a photo at the time that you thought was really good, and now you're like, oh no, that was a bit crap. What is it, other than being able to do things like move around the pitch and sort your settings, what is it that's kind of set you apart and improved you as a photographer?
I set little challenges to myself constantly. So I will say, today I want to do X. So before, when I was first starting out, it was like, I just want to get a damn photo in focus. Anyone. But then it was, okay, well, I want to get better at panning. I want to get better at being my awareness and being where I am. I want to get my focus pin sharp rather than just being okay. I want it pin sharp. Or I want more distant shots, more action shots, more paddock shots. I want to see a car on 2 wheels, and I'd just be looking for that and trying to achieve that for my attendance for that day. Or I'd focus on one car or another car, or I don't just take forward facing shots, or just look for different angles. So I set lots of different mental challenges for myself to try and achieve in that given day. It's a bit different, but the last one I set myself was to try and improve my usable photos afterwards, because obviously, you know, there are thousands of photos that are out. You know, I'm sitting on, I'm holding a shutter down and it's going, you know, there's thousands of photos that I don't use, but the most recent thing I concentrated on was improving the ratio that I can actually use, so that I've got more option and more shots to yeah.
Brad, I want to talk about panning a little bit, and for everybody in the audience who may not know from a photography standpoint what panning is, it's essentially like following a subject along with it and then creating a singular image, and then the subject is in focus and everything else looks like it's just blowing by. And I've done panning for like a city bus, maybe a car, but like nothing at that speed. Like, probably the most difficult that I've ever done was at a track meet, like the sprinters coming around, just because you have the torso, the arms, and the legs are all going at different speeds and trying to get that one singular thing. So when you have something coming at 150 miles an hour, like, to time your movement, like, how long did it take you to get that pivot so you're like, okay, I feel comfortable that I can match the speed of the subject?
To get it right,
yeah,
probably the whole of the first season.
Okay.
How long's the season?
So it runs from there's probably two weekends a month from April all the way till October. So it took me all of that to understand how I did it, and that's nothing. Yeah, okay, there's camera settings and everything, but that's just technique. That's all that is. And about being stable in what you're doing, and learning how fast you need to move when something's going that fast. But if it's doing this speed, I don't have to do that. Or if it's coming at me, I need to do something different. Or, you know, if it's going away from me, it's great, but I know my focus is going to fall off when it's going away from me, because my camera's trying to focus on something that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's just, yeah, it took me a long while, and it's still a conscious thought, to be fair, of, you know, getting your posture right and getting yourself tucked in so you can support your camera properly. And
I was going to ask, do you do this all handheld, or are you using a monopod, or like, how are you, like, because, you know, again, for people who have never done panning, when you move, there's going to be there might be a little bit up and down unless you lock that in, and it's like, you got to keep that a steady state. So are you using any apparatus to help you in that, or are you just handhelding?
I'm holding entirely.
You're just out there raw dogging it, like, just
so loads of people use monopods. So monopod, obviously we know what a monopod is, but just for the sake of it, one stick supporting your lens about halfway down so that it balances the camera. You can just spin the camera around. But no, I don't use a monopod at all. I could, and I've thought about it. Believe me, I've thought about it. But I want to be able to do it, not rely on it. I don't want to be somewhere one day and go, oh, I can't because I don't have X, Y with me or whatever. Right. If I can get good at it, properly good at it, then all these things can help me, absolutely. And if I go somewhere and, you know, someone's hired me to do something and I absolutely need to get that shot, no question, then sure, okay, there's nothing wrong with putting a monopod on there. I'll put a monopod on there and make sure that, you know, I nail that shot. But the past 2 years have been about getting myself to a point where I can do it, and I can comfortably do it, and I know if I need to attain something or need to go get a shot, then I can do it. And it's just tweaking and making sure that I'm good at that.
You mentioned that the thing goes from April to October. So what do you do as a photographer when there's like 4 or 5 months downtime?
What, in the down? Oh, okay, so you mean in winter, right? So when there's nothing going on. Well, there's plenty of things to shoot that aren't motorsport. So I get out there and shoot other things. It's difficult because you can't actually shoot motorsport, and that's a very specific thing, and I feel quite a specific skill. Yes, there's panning of other things. You can go and take a photo of a city bus, John, but it's not the same. It just isn't the same.
It's just moving like this. That was the first thing I'm like, I'm going to test out panning, and I know I can catch the bus because it's a large target and it's not moving that quickly. Like,
does everything feel like it's not slow motion after that?
Yeah, it's not the same. So you've got material, right? Because and content, because you've been shooting all year. And the material that tends to get used in the off season is the stuff that you didn't use because you didn't want to, because you had other stuff during the summer. So yeah, you've still got a bank of thousands of photos that you can lean back on and edit and re-edit or do something different with, or try that thing that you've been wanting to try. But yeah, physically picking up a camera, I go shoot other things, because there's nothing worse than getting all the way back round to April. Everyone does it. I don't care how good they are. Everyone does it. Like, they pick up that camera again, they're back at the side of the circuit, and they go, right, can I even remember how to do this? Like, it's like not riding a bike for years and climbing back on a bike, and you're like, oh God, can I still balance? everyone does that for the first 30 minutes of the first race of the season. Just, getting back on the horse and remembering what you're doing.
Have you done any like as you're building these relationships with these teams and the crew, like because you're around and you're going to talk to them in the driver. Have you got into any of like stage studio photography of the cars? Like I know a couple people in my area who they do like the lighting for cars like that. That to me is something different, like because of the reflection points and especially some of the metals, you got to make sure the lighting's out of it. You want the clean lines. Have you played around with anything in that realm?
No, so I've never managed to get a car in a studio. Weirdly, a few weeks back, I did take a photo of a car in a paddock, and then put it in a studio. It wasn't in the studio, but I had to mess around with Photoshop and fake lighting and what have you, and put it in a studio, which was quite cool. But no, I've never had the opportunity to do that. It would be something that I'd love to do, in a nice controlled studio environment where you can take when there's plenty of second takes.
Yeah,
that would be great. Yeah.
Plus the design of these cars, like there's so much going into them. Like I would love to and I'm not like a super car guy, but like I love the construction of cars and all of the different details that you can get into with these high performance vehicles, like to really play with it and make something of a story of all the parts.
So again, how I said people forget the paddock and only take photos of the racing. Some people, not everyone, but some people forget the paddock. Well, on top of that, again, is you're in the paddock and there's all these cars here. Okay, you don't have access to them most of the time. Sometimes you do though. And if you've got access to the car, people aren't making the most of that moment. Like people don't get that close to that car ever. Or if they do, they have a look at it and peer around it for a couple of minutes. But you could go around it with a fine-tooth comb and be getting little detail shots of, the harness through the window, the buttons on the steering wheel, the close-up shot of the bolt holding the massive wing on at the back, the stop-start switch, the kill switch, all those sorts of things that people don't actually pay attention to. But as a set, if you're thinking, well, like going around the racetrack, you've got them on two wheels, you've got them on the podium, you've got them in the paddock, you've got the driver with putting his helmet on, and then you've got the detailed shots of all these cars. Well, as a set, that's quite a valuable package, because then you're telling that story about what that driver's been doing, and you've got him in the paddock and all those different shots and getting ready and then on the track. So the detail, I'm pleased you said that, because the detail is exactly what makes it.
Yeah, it's wild. Like when you think about how much goes into making a machine that's safe enough for somebody to travel at that speed.
Yeah. But then people think that motorsport photography is about watching them race around a track at 150 mile an hour or whatever. But then all of a sudden, in the paddock and getting detailed shots of cars is static. So it's static shots of cars, which is, I suppose, similar to like model photography where you're getting to pose something. Yes, it's a car and you can't ask it to pose, but you can take it in a specific setting and get certain angles of the car. So there's different aspects to it, and that's kind of like portrait photography, I suppose, ish, because the subject's still, and I can take detailed shots of the subject, whatever the subject is.
Brad, tell us, what is the pie in the sky ambition for you? What's the goal? What would you love to do?
The pie in the sky goal. The pie in the sky goal would be, I would love to be signed to a major race team as their main photographer. That's what I would like to do.
Is that what you're walking towards?
It's what I would love to do and what I would love to work towards, or maybe a couple of teams. But yeah, if I could achieve that, I think that would be great. And because then you can do all the behind the scenes stuff, all the BTS stuff, all the getting the car ready, all the off-season stuff, the
I was just
building.
gonna say, like, that's an entire off season of content of,
Yeah,
this, it's the drivers doing their workouts because they have to be in a certain physical condition in order. It's the piece of the narrative that you don't get to tell today, which is all the
right.
stuff that goes into before the starting line.
Before that moment, the on the race one of the season, they're sat on the grid and the light is green and they push the accelerator to the floor. There's so much more that's happened before that one moment. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. We watched 14 laps of it. It's nothing compared to everything that goes on behind the scene, all the tire testing, everything. So yeah, I get to tell one part of the story at the moment, but I hope at some point I get to tell it all, and that'd be, and then get paid for it as well, obviously.
Yeah, well, I'm just picturing like the whole process of like just even loading because they come with multiple cars, they got to load the cars on the trucks, and it's like there's an entire logistics that goes into, it's always the one driver, one car, but there's like a team of like 100 behind them doing all this stuff. Like it just
yeah, and all the mechanics, and it's absolutely a team behind it. And I suppose in a way, a photographer is part of that team in a way, to tell that story. They don't affect the win or lose. They don't affect that, but they affect who knows about it. So
we were just talking about like, when you think about like the rise in popularity of F1 in the United States is very much is correlated to people got the behind the scenes stories from the Netflix series. So from a photographer standpoint, it's not affecting the race, but it may affect the number of people buying tickets to the next one. Because you're creating an in for non-race fans to say, oh, this is now a person I'm rooting for, and I'm just going to go show up now.
And this is what it's about. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so many stories in motorsport that don't get told, because everyone's focusing on where they are in the championship or how many points they've got, or but there's an emotional side to motorsport that people don't see. Yes, people are passionate about their favorite driver or car or team or whatever, and there's passion from a fan side, but from the drivers and team side, you don't often get to see that aspect of it, and how much passion and dedication and trauma even is in that side of it very, very often. So that'd be cool to be able to show that.
Yeah, I'm conscious. Go on.
No, I was going to say one of the touring car drivers said recently, because you mentioned Drive to Survive, John. One of the touring car drivers said it's a shame there isn't a Drive to Survive for the touring cars, because there is so much stuff that goes on between the teams in the paddock that everyone would love to know, but there's nothing telling that story. And that was a driver saying that. Well,
and maybe it might be coming, because you're starting to see that more, like the Welcome to Wrexham documentary. Like, do you know how many fans so Rob McElhaney, who's one of the owners and from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he actually grew up around the corner from where I am sitting right now. So in Philadelphia, like he's a big name. And so the number of like Wrexham fans that just popped up out of nowhere because they watched this documentary, they got to know the players, they got to know like the inner workings, like those stories matter to people. And so if that's your way in to say, hey, I can tell these stories and we can get, we can make people passionate who may not know anything about this, because like I said, I'm not a big racing fan. I have not watched Drive to Survive, but I understand that once you get into the story, like, okay, well now I'm invested, because now I have a connection to these people. So I really do hope that's where you end up, because I love those types of stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully.
Now, do you do video too?
I've thought about doing video. I've got like a GoPro and what have you. Something that I particularly find difficult is trying to do photography and videography at the same time.
Yeah.
There's lots of things going on all at the same time. I hope to one time or eventually be able to do that, but I think really I need to do one thing at once, because doing more than one thing at once means that I'm concentrating on none. So it hasn't worked out the ways that I've tried it yet. Maybe I might figure it out one day, but as of right now, okay.
Okay, I was going to say before, I'm conscious of time. So where can people find you, Brad? What's your Instagram handle?
So my Instagram is 8th.element_. If you want to find me, I don't have a website, so you can't find me there, no matter how hard you try looking.
Perfect. And thank you for your insights today, and thank you for being our guest.
Yeah, this was fun. I really enjoyed learning, because that is such it's one of those things that's in the realm of the thing I do. Like, it's the actual same tool, but the way you use it, it's so vastly different from how I do it. It was fun to hear about how you do that. And I love the in-depth stories of like the characters that go into like these main events. Like, there's so much backstory that you could tell. So thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
I'm going to stop recording now.